Hi, and welcome to the Midday Market Update for June 25th, 2020. My name is Kevin Hill, here as always with Michael Vincent for our twice weekly show covering the freight markets. And
yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, totally interactive.
Yeah, interactive show. Get your comments, questions on FreightWaves, FreightWaves LinkedIn and Facebook channels. Get your comments, questions in, and we'll get them answered and as best we possibly can. So get those in here. We got a great show today, though, huh?
We do. We do. So basically, we have from the University of Arkansas, Dean Matt Wallace joining us at 12:30 for an interview, and at 12:40 we have from Convoy,
Aaron Terrazas, who is Director of Economic Research.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
so that'll be an interesting topic there, too.
Talking about
driver qualifications.
Driver qualifications, carrier safety, and vetting. And we'll talk about the freight markets with our Director of Freight Market Intelligence, Zach Strickland, and initial jobless claims, because it's Thursday.
It is.
With Anthony Smith, our lead economist.
Yeah, I think we have some orders numbers that just came out as well, I think.
We do, yeah.
Which will be interesting to go through. I'm not sure if he'll touch on that, but I think he will. I think we can bait him into it.
Yeah, I
He's
think
an
you
economist.
Can ask him the question, right?
I think we can.
I think he'll probably answer us, too.
Yeah, he probably will.
He probably will. But we'll start it off with the FreightWaves.com headlines that we have out this morning with Andrew Cox. And our lead story today is the status of the class action suit from employees at TQL against TQL. What do we have on that, Andrew?
Yes, good afternoon, Kevin. Clarissa Hawes reports on this one that the long-awaited trial in the overtime compensation class action lawsuit brought by former TQL employees has been pushed back because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The bench trial was scheduled to start on July 13th. However, the lead attorney representing former TQL employees in the class action complaint says a hearing of recently filed motions will be held on that date. The complaint, which was filed all the way back in September 2010, claims that more than 4,500 employees working at TQL's headquarters in Cincinnati from the time of September 2008 to mid-April of 2016 were cheated out of millions of dollars in overtime pay while working at the second largest freight brokerage in the United States. Also named in the complaint is Ken Oakes, CEO and co-founder at TQL. Recruiters for TQL admit they seek college graduates to join their freight brokerage as sales trainees who are expected to make up to 100 cold calls per day. These trainees are expected to spend at least 6 months conducting sales calls for freight brokerage, earning between $36,000 and $38,000 before they are then even considered to make the move from salary to a commission-based pay system. However, former TQL employees told FreightWaves that they estimate only around 5% of those people actually make it once they've transitioned to commission-only pay systems. Former employees told FreightWaves they were expected to work more than 60 hours per week to meet sales goals and were expected to be available 24 hours per day, 7 days a week to increase TQL's customer base, and were expected to respond to customer problems or questions at all times. However, the plaintiffs claim the claims in the class action suit they weren't paid for the additional hours they worked at TQL, and that TQL violated the Fair Labor Standards Act and by not paying them overtime. And this isn't the only trouble going on at TQL right now. They actually have a second class action lawsuit being brought against them, this one from the data breach that happened earlier this year. Several trucking companies have joined a class action complaint against TQL for failure to implement and maintain security measures after the freight brokerage notified the carriers that it had had a data breach in late February, several days after the initial security breach had been discovered.
They've certainly had their fair share of problems, haven't they?
They have in 2020. And that's a story Clarissa Hawes has been following for the last few months, ever since the hack. It's always surprising how long class action lawsuits take to get to trial. This one was originally filed in 2010.
Yeah, it's taken a decade.
A decade.
To get to a hearing to set a date for a trial.
Yes. So, and now it's getting delayed by the coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly.
Pandemic.
Exactly. 100 cold calls a day, Kevin.
It's tough to do. I've done it before in my life.
I have done it before in my life, too. I was taught fairly early on by a VP of sales at Aramark, actually. Chase the nose.
Yeah, chase the no's. The more no's, the closer you get to a yes.
You have a goal for the number of no's, and if you get 5 yeses and you think it's a great day, but you still need 25 more no's, it's not a great day yet. Go get those 25 others.
I know you know how it feels to be on call 24/7 as a freight broker, too.
I've been in the industry for 33 years in operations, et cetera, and sales, and 24/7, 365. It's freight.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away.
It does not.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And the 5% turnover is. I mean, they're throwing college.
5% actually make it.
Or 5% actually make it, right? So 95% turnover isn't shocking when you're taking just. Okay, you're a college student. You got your degree. Just throw you in here and see how you do in this high pressure boiler room type of brokerage type of thing.
Yeah, that's about normal.
I would think
it's a very high turnover environment, definitely.
Yeah.
Our next headline here is YRC, and Todd Maiden has some details on the health benefits and payments. What do we have on that, Andrew?
Yeah, Kevin, as the end of the 8-week extension of healthcare benefits for workers of YRC worldwide nears, questions mount on whether the company will fund the missed benefit payments and what will happen to the workers' health coverage. In mid-April, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters informed members YRC had been granted a grace period on health and welfare and pension fund contributions due to a sharp decline in volumes amid the pandemic. The letter said the payment extension was granted for March contributions with the warning the carrier may seek similar remedy for additional months. On May 8th, the Central States Health Fund, known as Team Care, informed YRC members the LTL carrier was delinquent in making healthcare contributions on their behalf in March, and that payments for April and May were not going to be paid. The memo informed members their fund was in suspension of benefit status, but that the health fund's trustees had enacted layoff coverage and would cover their medical claims for the maximum period of 8 weeks. The memo said the extension would apply to actively working and laid-off employees, providing a full 8 weeks of medical coverage, even if employees were recently laid off and had already used a portion of their layoff coverage. The extended coverage period began for claims incurring after May 10th. The Team Care memo also informed members that even though extensive discussions were held, an acceptable repayment proposal to the fund had yet been received. The fund estimated the 3-month period would result in nearly $75 million delinquency, in addition to the more than $48 million already owed to the Teamsters by YRC from a prior debt restructuring. In late May, YRC acknowledged the late payments in a statement to FreightWaves, but the company said they were continuing to work with the funds and the Teamsters to ensure uninterrupted access to healthcare benefits. As the expiration draws closer, no update has been provided by either parties involved.
It's a complicated mess, isn't it?
It is. It's complicated. It's tough to follow.
It kind of is,
but ongoing. It seems to never end.
It is, and Andrew, doesn't it extend? I mean, it extends past what when you read the story, you think YRC and their employees, right? And their Teamster employees and the health benefits funds, obviously. But doesn't it extend past that into the Teamsters funds for benefits to those that aren't working and are retired now, or even retired from companies that don't even exist anymore? I mean, isn't that financing also an issue right now, or impaired, I guess, or whatever you want to say? Would that not be a case? And
I think so.
Why all the extensions and the extensions and the extensions? Are they banking on a government bailout here to help them out?
I don't know if they're banking on it, but it would probably help the situation.
Yeah,
if it did happen,
think it would. I mean, I just look at what's going on in the freight market right now, what's going on with YRC, et cetera, and how are they going to make this up? Isn't there like $30 million they would owe then January 1st, 2021? Mm-hmm. Something like that?
Yeah, no, it's a mess. So Mr. Supply Chain is out watching us today, and he says, hey, gents, and hello to you, Mr. Supply Chain, Daniel Stanton.
Daniel Stanton, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, and our next headline here is the broker-carrier controversy and investigations and, how those are going from the USTA. What do we have on that?
Yeah, Kevin, John Gallagher brings this one to us. He says, while the battle over trucker-broker transparency and alleged misconduct has cooled somewhat in the recent weeks, the fight continues in offices and backrooms in Washington. Broker-carrier relationships have been often contentious, but tanking spot rates during the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic brought it with new allegation of unethical behavior on the behalf of brokers by small business truckers. What was initially accepted as a weekend May Day rally in Washington by independent owner-operators evolved into a nearly 3-week demonstration that featured a supportive tweet by the president and a culmination with a meeting with the White House, with the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in the White House. Meadows, in turn, promised to put his weight behind an inquiry initiated by the U.S. Justice Department into allegations of broker collusion. Also attending were C.J. Carman, CEO of truck driver app Easy Logs, and Jim Mullen, the acting administrator of the FMCSA. Michael Landis, CEO of the United States Transportation Alliance, is hopeful that the meeting and the investigation, which he confirmed is ongoing, have raised awareness of the issue significantly. Landis said a critical point in the meeting came when Meadows asked if he was looking for any kind of cap to be put on rates being charged. I told him no, because that would be un-American. He then winked and nodded and said good, because that can't happen.
You don't really want caps on how much.
No, they just want to regulate how low they can go.
How low it goes, right? You know,
they just want a floor.
Everyone loves the free market until it turns against
floor,
them,
no
right?
ceiling.
I was actually talking to Dave Nemo this morning from SiriusXM, from Dave Nemo's show, and he was doing a panel discussion with the FMCSA. He told me, and it came up through this virtual panel that he was on earlier this week, that there's only like 4 or 5 complaints against freight brokers that have been filed so far with transparency, and the carrier didn't actually waive out that.
Okay, so there is actual complaints on that, because we talked about that before, where they're actually signed, when they sign the load contract, it's actually, there's verbiage usually in there that waives that right? But
I believe they're only saying there's 4 or 5.
There's only like 4 or 5.
Right, so it's not this tidal wave of complaints coming in that freight brokerages have not been transparent.
Yeah.
I think it's only like 4 or 5.
Yeah, because in this article, wasn't it saying that they were basically implying collusion of brokers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they were in April. But as we'll find out here in a few minutes with Zach Strickland, you know, the freight markets are heating up, so those initial complaints are kind of dying out, I think. You know,
unless they're looking for that cap.
Unless they're looking for that cap, definitely. Yeah. Let's move to international shipping and super tankers, Andrew.
Yeah, Kevin, Greg Miller reports there are now a lot more tankers than cargoes on the water. Rates are sliding, owners are capitulating, and charters have the upper hand. Rates for very large crude carriers, these are tankers that carry more than 2 million barrels of oil, or barrels of crude rather, from the Middle East, Gulf to Asia, were down to $20,000 per day on Wednesday, with a global average assessed at $26,000 roughly from brokerage Howell Robinson. The dam has burst, and those very large crude carriers' rates have taken an overdue nosedive, said the brokerage Fernley's in a new report. Current rates are less than a tenth of the record $250,000 per day plus peak in March, and below rates of $28,000 per day this time last year. Meanwhile, rates for Suez Maxes, these are tankers that carry 1 million barrels of crude, are down to just $9,700 per day, while Aframaxes, these carry 75,000 barrels, are down to $8,200 per day. These rates are at near multi-level lows, and the outlook for all tanker classes remains negative.
Yeah, and reading into that article, you know, Greg Miller reports also that, you know, there's, and he was quoting some gentleman speaking about the floating storage that's out there right now, and that's another major headwind, which the effects of will really be determined, or the depths of the effect. There will be an effect. A negative effect on an economic recovery as on this as well, right? So a steeper, more V-shaped recovery would have a more immediate and deeper effect on these rates, sending them even to lower multi-year lows, but then quicker to normalization of those rates.
For the super tankers?
For the super tankers. Exactly what he was talking about. So you got that floating out there, and you know this other headwind that is out there as well that could affect it, or will, actually, just how deep.
Well, Andrew, let's cover some new technology on FreightWaves.com. Linda Baker reports THL Supply Chain Partners is looking to partner with Blue Yonder to accelerate warehouse robotics.
Yeah, Kevin, our partner for the DHL Supply Chain Pricing Power Index has formed a partnership to launch a new plug-and-play robotics platform in collaboration with Microsoft and the AI-driven digital fulfillment provider Blue Yonder. The robotics platform marks another step in DHL's broader digitization efforts. It is designed to reduce integration time and programming efforts involved in onboarding new automation devices into warehouse facilities, and to give the company's customers flexibility in selecting suitable robotic systems that meet their business needs. The aim is not to replace employees over time, Voss clarified, but to assign the more attractive and interesting tasks to our human workforce. The first implementation at a DHL supply chain facility in Madrid has demonstrated a 60% reduction in integration times, according to the press statement. And with subsequent deployments, DHL foresees further improvements to get up towards 90%. The robotics platform is powered by Blue Yonder's Luminate platform with machine learning-driven task management capabilities that enable a high level of warehouse operational efficiency. As labor market shortages hit the market during peak season, DHL sites can now bring on a robotics vendor quickly to augment its resource capacity and support its workforce, said Girish Rishi, CEO of Blue Yonder, in a statement. Other elements of DHL supply chain's digitization strategy include focusing on technologies such as robots, smart operations through wearable devices, and data analytics.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for those headlines. You can find all of those stories, plus much, much more on FreightWaves.com. And we also have another story out right now. Lordstown Motors says first-year electric pickup build is sold out. So the Lordstown plant is producing an electric pickup, and it's sold out. So you can find that on the top headline right now at FreightWaves.com.
No kidding. Awesome.
Very good.
Wonder if Dooner's got a down payment on one of those too.
Maybe so. Yeah, I know Tesla, but I don't know about I don't know if Dooner has that down payment on electric pickup truck. Another one. But right now we're talking about the freight markets with our own Director of Freight Market Intelligence, Zach Strickland. And what are the freight markets telling us now?
So, yeah, the market has taken a sharp turn north in terms of tightness. We're seeing volumes continue to increase at an accelerating pace. We're now up above 12,000 for the first time since late March on the outbound tender volume index. But that's that's about that's a 6.5% increase versus this time last week. And tender rejection rates have followed suit, increasing over 400 basis points. We're now above 11% on the outbound tender rejection index for the United States. I think what's more surprising to me about all this is the rate of acceleration here. One of the things that we also track is the lead time. So the difference between the pickup and the requested pickup date and the tender date. So the difference between that gives the carrier enough time to get its truck in position, make sure that it has all the equipment it needs, et cetera. The longer the lead time is. And right now, those lead times are declining rapidly as we approach the July the 4th holiday.
Yeah, you say tender lead times declining as we go in, but a decline in tender lead time would indicate falling out of routing guides? No?
Not necessarily. It's more of a, the shippers are basically giving carriers less notice. So if they don't have enough notification, this has like a compounding impact on capacity in the country, because if you have a load that's now you give them 3 days to go pick up some freight. Now you only give them 2 days to go pick up freight. Well, those loads that you submitted yesterday are going to pick up on the exact same day as the loads you submitted today. So it's going to compound the impact of those volumes increasing over time. So it's got an exponential impact on the decreasing of capacity in the market. So because now you have 2 loads picking up on the same day with one of them having less time, it's going to increase tender rejection rates just by the nature of it.
So
right. Go ahead.
So Zach, what are the odds or the probabilities of we seeing another doubling in, because about 2 weeks we've doubled the tender rejection rate. What are the chances of doubling going into July 4th from 11% now to 20%, 22%?
I don't think 20% is out of the question, but I don't think that we're going to double. Obviously, the rate of expansion right now does indicate that we would possibly hit that 25% tender rejection rate, which we saw middle of 2018, one of the tightest markets of the last decade or so. But I don't think that we're going to do that. I think we'll probably calm down a little bit. I think we're going to see this initial push. I think what we're starting to see right now is a lot of these shippers getting ahead of the curve next week as vacations, et cetera, are really propping, they're becoming more imminent. So they're trying to push a lot of this freight out now, get ahead of the ball. I think we might be entering the peak now as opposed to maybe later next week. So I do think that we'll see some of these rejection rates start to smooth out a tad as we approach midweek next week, which does not exactly give us a full 7 days to see the same level of expansion.
Yeah, and normally we see this bump about now, and if you look at it year over year, if you look at those trends year over year, we're several days behind last year, right? So you can see that it should drop off a little bit. Both volume should drop off. Tender lead times should start to extend again next week as they look to book for the week following. Correct, Zach?
Yeah, that's accurate. What'll happen is probably about midweek next week is you'll start to see a lot of these, lead times expand back to, where they're going to submit loads to get in front of the next week, which I think is what we're seeing now. So we're almost seeing this pull forward of freight, tender activity before July 4th.
Excellent.
Yeah, excellent. What about the refrigerated market, Zach?
Yeah, the refrigerated market does continue to be relatively tight. We're starting to see, however, a change in direction of the spot rates for the produce shipments coming off the West Coast. It does appear that carriers are still, there's still a preference to moving along the southern corridor of the United States, across I-40, et cetera, to get to Atlanta and Dallas, as rates have, basically stayed flat week over week now. But however, going into the parts of the Midwest and obviously the Northeast, where there's just not a lot of reefer freight, reefer carriers are not giving any discount going up there. They're still increasing rates going into the cooler sections of the country, which traditionally have less volume for reefer freight. I think it's still interesting to see that we just haven't seen that level of expansion coming across the border on the same note of that we saw coming off the West Coast in terms of produce rates, even though it is that time of year where we do see a lot more Mexican produce. And we have talked about how Laredo has really been tightening here over the last little bit, just because of a lot of the, everything's ramping back up down there as well.
Well, thank you very much for your great insights again today, Zach. That's our Director of Freight Market Intelligence here at FreightWaves. And he brings up some really interesting points.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. He's going to join me later on today on freight forecasting. Kind of take a look at these numbers, 4 o'clock Eastern time on FreightWaves TV. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is going on right now, but really trying to see past the 4th. What does the rest of the summer look like going into Q3? Mm-hmm. And, what are the economic numbers, et cetera, that I think... who do we have up next?
Well,
Anthony
talking about
Smith.
Economic numbers, we're going to talk initial jobless claims because it's Thursday morning here, or Thursday afternoon, I should say. And we have our very own lead economist, Anthony Smith, joining us. What do we have for initial jobless claims today?
And that's right, Kevin. So we have the brand new numbers for initial jobless claims that shows that there were another 1.48 million Americans that applied for jobless benefits in the U.S. over the last week. And so this is a lot slower than analysts and people throughout the country that have been monitoring this would expect it to see. And so essentially what we've seen is that there's been a bit of a flattening effect. Even though it is coming down, overall claims are starting to kind of ease in this pace of descent. On the continuing claim side, there has also been a decline over the last week. So jobless claims, initial jobless claims measures the most recent week, so not this current week, but the most recent week. Continuing claims is a 2-week lag, so not this week, last week, but the week before. So there's a 2-week lag for continuing claims, and that moved down to 19.5 million from the 20.29 million, so just over 20 million. So this was another decline in the hundreds of thousands, over 600,000 decline. So we are seeing declines as more states start to reopen, but it is starting to really flatten. Some analysts are really expecting that this is due to more coronavirus cases kind of being ramped up as more states start to reopen. Over the last week, one of the states that had the highest numbers of jobless claims came from California, with a week of 287,000 claims coming in for the state alone. This was up from 241 claims. Now, of course, California being a big state, I think the population is somewhere around 38, 39 million, population larger than Canada, so it is expected to have a larger number of claims coming in, but nonetheless, we are seeing claims rise in some states. On the contrary, we are starting to see some states come down. Some of these states that have been on the reopen a little bit longer, such as Georgia, which came down to 124,000 claims in the most recent week, and this was from 132,000 the week prior. So we are starting to see more states starting to come down. Some states are rising. I think this is kind of on par with what we expected, that not each state is going to be the same trial or path. Each state's going to have its own individual struggles.
Thank you very much, Anthony. What about, talking about jobless claims and unemployment, what are the industrial numbers telling us getting people back into their manufacturing jobs?
Sure. So another important release that came out were durable good orders that came out this morning from the U.S. Census Bureau. What we did see is that overall durable good orders were up 15.8%. This is a nice bump up, but should be noted that this is still 13.6% down from the year ago level. We also saw rises in some industries that were expected as we see more motor vehicle manufacturers kind of come online, an upwards of well over 20%, but still down well over 20% on a year-over-year basis. The area that I really like to draw my attention to is non-defense capital goods new orders excluding aircraft. So looking at non-defense capital goods new orders excluding aircraft is a really good barometer for business-to-business activity. And what we saw in the latest report for the latest month was a 2.3% rise on a month-over-month level. But again, this is still down 2.5% year over year. This is one of the more minimal year-over-year declines, and that's kind of telling to show just how weak business-to-business and business investments were this time last year.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for those insights. You guys did Freightonomics yesterday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, you and Zach Strickland. What did you guys talk about?
That's right. So yesterday we did our Freightonomics podcast with the great Sultan of Sonar, Zach Strickland. We had a special guest, Mike Bowden, market expert for rail intermodal. And so we essentially talk about every single aspect of transportation and looking at Mike's perspective. We were able to kind of draw some really cool parallels there, looking at the industrial sector and what that means for rail intermodal. Certainly a lot of struggles on the manufacturing side, but an excellent episode as always with Mr. Bowden and Zach Strickland.
Great. Exciting show. And you can pick that up on the podcast version or audio-only version at Freightcast or, as always, FreightWaves TV, tv.freightwaves.com, or download that for Amazon, Roku, Apple TV. So thanks again, Anthony Smith.
Yeah, interesting numbers that are going on there, right? I mean, they're positive in a way that they're
whether they're positive compared to sequentially, they're positive, right?
Sequentially, they're positive, but year over year, not so great. And the jobless claims, the initial jobless claims, is starting to flatten. That curve is flattening out. And like you said before, the continuing claims, right, has come down, but it hasn't been a steady decline. It's bumped up and then come down a little bit, and it's also a little bit flat. So,
all right, we'll see. We will see. So joining us now is the Dean of the Sam M. Walton School of Business at University of Arkansas,
right.
And that is Dean Matt Wallace. How are you doing today, Dean?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Very good. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about University of Arkansas being number one in Gartner's supply chain rankings.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Matt Waller, and I'm Dean of the Sam M. Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas. We have about 6,100 undergraduates and about 600 graduate students in the college. We have 8 different academic departments. One of them is the Department of Supply Chain Management. My experience in supply chain has been more from the technology side and consulting side. I used to have a software company called Mercari Technologies, and I've been a professor in the Walton College for many years. I also was chair of the Department of Supply Chain Management when we started it in 2011. It was a brand new program. And then I did that for a few years, and then I was Associate Dean for Executive Education, and 5 years ago I became Dean.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And now Gartner came out with the rankings, I believe, yesterday in a webinar, and University of Arkansas and your college, School of Business, the Sam Walton, was ranked #1. How does that feel?
I can barely contain myself. No, seriously, I am so thrilled. You can't imagine it. I mean, we thought our rankings were going to improve. I mean, the faculty, the way they went about designing the curriculum for this program is remarkable. I've never seen it done so thoroughly in a way that really engages the best of academics and the best of practitioners in practice. They really put a lot of effort into this. It took years. But yeah, so we thought, okay, we're probably going to do pretty well. They come out with this ranking every 2 years, and when they said #1, we were high-fiving. It felt like winning a national championship, you know, which we're far away from doing in football, that's for sure. But anyway, yeah, it was great.
Did you give out a big pig suey?
I could. Woo, pig.
Nice.
there you go.
Nice.
There you go.
What are some of the most important or fundamental, parts of the supply chain that you teach there, or your department emphasizes at the University of Arkansas?
Yeah, that's a great question, because actually, Gartner, one thing I like about their ranking compared to a lot of, and I will answer your question, but I want to tie it to the ranking as well. But Gartner, most rankings are extremely subjective, but theirs is more, there's a very clear structure to it, and they dig in. It's not an easy ranking. So for example, it's around 3 areas. One is industry value, one is program scope, and one is program size. But just as an example, this will tie to your question, program scope. They want to see, are you covering just pieces of the supply chain? Are you doing it broadly? Are students coming out with not only good theoretical understanding, but practical understanding? So we did something that I was told was not permissible, but we somehow were able to do it. We require internships for students, paid internships. You have to have one to graduate. And when you've got as many students as we do, when we started the program, we were graduating about 50 students per year, and now we're graduating, I don't know, over 250 per year. And they're getting there's plenty of jobs out there. But to answer your question about the curriculum itself, so we make sure, of course, like any business discipline, they have to take things in finance and accounting, marketing, management, economics, et cetera, business law. But we also have foundational courses, and the foundational courses, we have 4 of them. One is focused on planning, one is focused on sourcing, one is focused on making, and the other one is focused on delivering. So, we consider those to be the foundational courses after they've already had introduction to supply chain management. And then we have more focused courses like manufacturing and supply chain management, international logistics, sustainability and supply chain management, et cetera, et cetera. And then students are allowed to minor in certain things like business analytics or blockchain or ERP or accounting or whatever they would like to minor in. But we have a bunch of courses that engage industry. For example, one course we have is supply chain leadership, and the professor has leaders come in. The students study the people who are coming in, they study their leadership framework and they write an essay about it. So it's good because, the students take turns introducing the speakers too. That's something that a lot of times you can come out of college not having experience with. How do I introduce someone? How do I ask questions of someone? You two are very good at that kind of a thing, but a lot of people come out of school not knowing how to do it. We have another one called Supply Chain Design and Optimization, and the students work with LlamaSoft and a professor, and they do supply chain design projects. And so our curriculum integrates practice into some of the courses, but in addition to that, we require internships. And we're kind of fortunate in Northwest Arkansas, of course, we've got, a big retailer, carriers, and we also have about 1,500 consumer packaged goods companies with offices here. So there's lots of internships here, so students can do the internships. And, students who are really ambitious, I know several of them who literally have had internships from the summer after their freshman year until they graduate, including during the school year. And you can imagine, when students have that much experience, when they get to their senior level courses where they're actually, implementing some of the things they learned earlier in the program, because of that practical application experience, they can do it more effectively.
Yeah, now that practical experience there through the internship program that you're describing there is it's invaluable.
Yeah, it's a hub for the supply chain. It's where kind of the modern supply chain originated with Walmart. But you have Walmart, J.B. Hunt, you have Tyson, you have BNSF, I think, has a large presence there, and many others, all their vendors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that internship, not only for those students, giving them that practical knowledge and application like you're talking about as they become seniors and then graduate, and probably most of them probably hired by those internship companies, I would imagine, those companies that they were there with. But that's got to be feeding even, more intellect and more into the school itself, right? It kind of works both ways, does it not?
Absolutely. Because we have such a high concentration of expertise in supply chain and logistics in Northwest Arkansas, we have a lot of people that teach that, they might be executives at local companies, but they enjoy teaching, not just in supply chain, but in all the disciplines. And we like to get them involved. Some of our classes, we have something called the Masters of Applied Business Analytics. Every course is team taught between a practitioner and a professor. Every single course in that program. And some of our other course programs have that as well. But we like that kind of approach generally.
Very practical and hands-on, applied logistics or applied supply chain. Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing that's different that you might be interested in, in the past, most of our students were getting internships with huge companies, Fortune 500 companies, and they still do, and we encourage that. But during the 4-year time, we also want them to do internships with companies that might be startups or growth companies, something in that spectrum, or even a small business. It's good to have variety before you graduate in that way. And the Northwest Arkansas Council, which is an organization in Northwest Arkansas, allow startups to apply for funding that then if they hire an intern from the university, the council subsidizes the payment of the student. And so this way, it's kind of a win-win. The students then are getting experience with young high-tech startups, and the startups are able to afford them. So that's been a tremendous a win for us.
That's a great program.
Actually, we have a question here from Kyle Taylor, who's one of our account executives here for SONAR, and he asks, "What are your thoughts of people adding a supply chain degree after they've already started their careers?"
Well, I think it's probably a good idea. One thing you can do. There are programs out there. We have one, a Masters of Science in Supply Chain. You can do it part-time. or you can do it full-time. But you also have MBAs that may have a supply chain concentration. Our Masters of Science in Supply Chain Management, you could have been an art major as an undergraduate and still go into this program. You may have to take some courses online to prep you for it. But I think it's good because supply chain management is becoming more and more analytical. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician to use the analytics, but all supply chain leaders now have to understand, how do I apply technology to improve customer service? How can analytics be used to measure performance or predict performance, these kinds of things? And so in the program, while we don't train people to become, mathematically strong from a supply chain side per se, we want them to get to the point where they can really apply those things. So my answer would be, I think it's a good idea right now because the discipline's becoming more advanced than it's still, supply chain management is young compared to finance from a discipline perspective. If you're in finance, you need to know a lot of certain things. You don't see people that are CPAs that didn't study accounting. I think that's going to become more and more true in supply chain.
I believe you're right. And on trends and analytics, I remember it was probably 10 years ago when I was in business school, and we talked in supply chain classes. It was all about demand forecasting. And are there any tools or trends out there that is making those type of forecasts even any more accurate? Because those were always the hardest thing to do. And if you're in business, demand forecasting is more, magic or art than actual science sometimes.
Yeah. So I think that I agree with you. Forecasting is one of the most important things you can understand if you're in supply chain, because it affects your inventory management, it affects your positioning of assets, et cetera, et cetera. It's just all encompassing. This is my opinion, and it's not very encouraging in some ways, but it's an important point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that these high-tech methods of forecasting with machine learning and neural networks, I'm not convinced they do a lot better job. In many cases, they look like they do when you compare a forecast against historical data because it's really good at fitting the data. But the problem is it's fitting a lot of error, a lot of randomness into a model. And so what the research is showing unequivocally is that simpler models do better when it comes to demand forecasting. Now, if you're trying to forecast whether or not your car's getting close to an object, machine learning is great. But if you're trying to forecast the number of bags of Purina dog chow you're going to sell in, say, a particular Walmart store per day, machine learning is not going to work well. It's gonna overfit the data. So what supply chain managers need from a forecasting perspective is the ability to do what I just did, to explain where will the model work and where won't the model work. Because you don't need to build the model yourself these days. I used to teach how to build these 20 years ago in spreadsheets. But now there's so many great tools out there. You just need to know how to use them. And I think that's where people fall short quite a bit.
It's an interesting point. I've had that discussion with people before, with clients, et cetera, of FreightWaves Sonar, where it is that the data is there and you can use it and you can find the trends, you can do the analytics, but you have to have that expertise and that human sentiment and like you said, where is it going to work? Where isn't it going to work? Case in point right now, looking at all of the tender volumes, the tender rejects, et cetera, going on in dry van and refrigerated and even flatbed across the United States right now, one would tend to think that things are just awesome and they're going to continue that way. But you've got to have that expertise. You've got to have those economists. You've got to have that international, trade knowledge of what is going on in those capacity constraints and consumer sentiment, et cetera, and be able to interpret that stuff. And machine learning is not going to do all of that.
Well, you know, when I visited some of your conferences, FreightWaves conferences, and I've also visited your offices, and I am so impressed with SONAR. It really, the data that's available there and the information that's available there, I think all supply chain programs should be using that. I don't know why they're not. I mean, I've been around supply chain management for 30 years, and I've never seen this kind of information available. I still don't understand how y'all put it together. It's amazing, but so thought I'd put that plug in for SONAR.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful having you on, and congratulations again on being Gartner's #1 supply chain and logistics school, and that's the Sam M. Walton School of Business there at the University of Arkansas.
Yeah, congratulations.
How do people learn more about the business school?
They can go to Walton. That's walton.uark.edu. That's the website for the College of Business, and everything's there.
Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you very much for your time again. Again, that's Dean Matt Waller from University of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And congratulations to the business school there. And our next guest is ready, and
so Aaron Terrazas, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to see you guys.
So Aaron, you're Director of Economic Research at Convoy, and I really appreciate you coming on today. Both of us do, obviously, and most others will once they hear what we're talking about today. So talking about this software to qualify safe drivers, right? So can you speak to that a little bit? How does it work? Give us a little background on what you're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this week, our quality and compliance team announced a new crash risk model that's going to help us improve our selection of carriers. It's going to allow us to identify the carriers that have, the lowest risk of having an accident, having a claim, and automatically qualify them into our network. I think they estimate that this improves our ability to predict crash risk by about 16% over the industry average.
And is that using a lot of data collected from inspections and FMCSA, or kind of generally, how does that algorithm, or what kind of inputs do you put in?
Yeah, so it is kind of the FMCSA data. I think when you look across standard practice, we all know that there are kind of a lot of problems with the FMCSA data, particularly the basic scores. Been a lot of conversation and things written. You guys have done a lot of coverage about that. But instead of just using that out-of-the-bag score or rating that FMCSA provides, we know that 90% of carriers don't have a basic score. There's a lot of missing data in there. Instead of just using that kind of data and that score out of the bag, we are building our own model, our own crash risk model, using the full, complete set of data, and are able to use kind of a much longer history, a much broader set of variables into that predictive model. So this is, in some ways, it's almost like what insurers or actuaries have been doing for some time. As far as we're the only intermediary kind of doing it on our own.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Do you use traffic? I imagine you probably use traffic data and congestion and kind of where the carrier is based out of, as well as their most typical routes to kind of overlay into that FMCSA data.
There are all sorts of variables that kind of go into that crash prediction. I think we found some pretty interesting, maybe unexpected things when you look at what variables kind of do predict crashes and what variables don't. I think the ones that do predict crashes are pretty obvious. Things like prior crash history, speeding violations, years of experience is a big one. However, I think there were some that don't necessarily add a lot of predictive value. Things like improper turns or improper passing. So those are kind of some of the things that surprised me in there.
That's interesting. So there's like improper turns. So there's minor violations, I guess, aren't statistically significant to the profile.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
That is interesting to me.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a 16% fewer accidents than the industry history. As you build this out, are you predicting this to be more? Are you going to increase that number? Are you predicting that out to be a higher number of reduction?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously any of these models, as your prior guest was talking about, any of these models are kind of going to improve over time as more and more data and more time gets added to it. So I think, as we look out into the years ahead, this is a first benchmark, and I definitely expect that we'll improve on that.
How much has this helped you kind of automate that carrier vetting process internally, and how efficient is that now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great point. Often intermediaries are used to kind of doing a once and done kind of approach where they'll vet a carrier once and then they're good to go. One of the nice advantages of this approach is that it's automatically doing it multiple times a day, constantly evaluating that crash risk associated with that carrier based on any new data that come in.
That's fantastic.
It is fantastic, and safety is a big focus, and it's a focus of everybody. So, is this a selling point to shippers? Is this something they're focusing on more and more, and is this giving you that kind of added selling point to those shippers?
I think certainly shippers we work with, also the general public is excited about this. We've seen kind of a number of very big claims in recent years across the industry. And, I think everyone is always focused on safety. This adds a layer of reality and concreteness to it when we go talk to our customers.
Great. We have about a minute left for the interview, but I know that you study empty miles quite a bit, and just wanted to get your thoughts and kind of what your latest research is, or anything that you find really interesting on empty miles and how that's trending.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of been a focus of Convoy really since day one. Is how can we use data? How can we use analysis to try to reduce those empty miles that carriers run and make them more efficient? We know that when they're running more efficient, it's both good for their earnings, for what they're able to earn, and for the environment. We talk about our mission at Convoy is delivering the world's freight with endless capacity and zero waste. So that zero waste is very important to us. As far as where it's trending, the industry, I think, didn't make progress for about at least 2 decades. And then over the past, I'd say 2 to 3 years has begun to make a little bit more progress. You see that in the most recent ACRI numbers that kind of from a year ago at this point that showed a reduction in industry-wide empty miles. I think that's going to come into some challenges with all of the market disruptions over the past few months and COVID kind of forcing a lot of, producers to rethink, how they're doing it and disruptions in supply chain. I think that's going to put some stress on that progress that the industry has made over the past 2 to 3 years.
I imagine you're right, yeah. Your colleague there at Convoy will be joining us for the 3PL Summit on July 21st. Lauren Seeks, he's going to be talking about carrier vetting and kind of what we discussed today with Alicia Ruiz from Johansson. So that'll be an interesting talk during that. And again, that's July 21st, virtual event here, 3PL Summit. Thank you very much again for your time today.
Thank you, Aaron.
Totally.
Appreciate it very much. Very interesting stuff.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're also working with AB InBev or Anheuser-Busch on their sustainability challenge, 20 million miles. Empty miles.
Empty miles. So
tomorrow on What the Truck, we'll have Angie Slaughter and Anheuser-Busch with us talking about that a little bit. So
that'd be great.
Yeah.
So let's get some good news in there, some charitable, some something with Doctors Without Borders, right?
Doctors Without Borders. Yeah, let's get some good news. We were, the headlines were kind of lawsuit this and argument that. So anyways, from FreightWaves.com, Triton adds Doctors Without Borders with branded reefer containers. Triton International Limited has launched special edition refrigerated containers as intermodal billboards to support the work of Doctors Without Borders. Triton is asking anyone who spots the special containers on ships, trucks, railways, or docks to snap photos and post them with the hashtag Triton4MSF. To LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Triton will donate $100 to MSF for every original photo posted and tagged up to a maximum of $50,000 per year. Triton said it has contributed more than $100,000 to support MSF and is committed to donating an additional $200,000 over the next 3 years through the Triton4MSF hashtag Triton4MSF campaign. The special edition Triton4MSF reefer units will be built by Maersk Container Industries, which donated the services to apply the artwork. So MCI also will donate $10,000 directly to MSF in support of Triton's efforts. So excellent stuff, right?
It is excellent. I like that much better than just donating the $50,000.
Yeah.
Is basically you're setting something up to go viral. To get a lot of action, a lot of pictures posted online, and you really can market the cause, and it's much more effective than if you just donate.
It creates a buzz, and people get into it a little bit, and it creates more buzz and more awareness of that charity or that effort that you're trying to support. In this case,
like a grassroots
Doctors Without Borders.
Campaign,
Yeah, it's awesome.
Everyone's pushing out content for Doctors Without Borders.
It's awesome.
So
I love to see this type of stuff keep going. I keep saying it. We don't need a crisis to be excellent to each other. These are the type of things I'm talking about.
We
it's
do
awesome
not
stuff.
at all. At all.
At all, we don't.
So on FreightWaves TV, what do we have going on this week at 4 p.m.? We talked about it a little bit. Freight forecasting.
Yeah, Zach will be on. Yeah, Zach Strickland, our director of Freight Market Intelligence, will be on with me, and we'll be looking at the latest trends. We kind of talked about a little bit earlier in this program. What is going on right now leading up to the 4th, but more importantly, looking at those economic trends along with those truck volumes by the different modes and seeing past that kind of 4th, what's going to happen then? Because right now things are kind of following seasonal patterns, very elevated. How does that stay with industry, with production orders, et cetera? What's going to happen throughout the rest of summer? That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly right. And then tomorrow at noon, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have What the Truck, and you let slip one guest just a minute
ago. I did?
Who
did? Oh, I did. Angie Slaughter. Yeah, that's going to be a good one. So, so What the Truck tomorrow, fast food, beer, air, and base.
Wow.
That
sounds exciting.
Fast food, beer, air, base. So we got great guests. So Angie Slaughter is on tap. No pun intended. Well, pun intended. Sustainability Logistics at Anheuser-Busch InBev North America. John Brewer, Director of Distribution and Logistics at CKE Restaurants Incorporated. That's Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, by the way. Brian Schreiber, Manager of Air Cargo Business Development at Columbus Regional Airport Authority, OH. And Frank McCabe will be joining us on Play It Forward. He'll be playing the bass.
That's awesome. And I will be watching it on my TV in my apartment.
You will?
Live.
Live, yes, at noon tomorrow. Don't miss it. It's going to be epic. It's going to be awesome.
In the room
when
you guys are doing that. And and earlier, yesterday on Put That Coffee Down, we talked about selling a new product, gearing up your marketing, pushing that out, and creating sales with HubTech and Joel McKinley there. So that is an exciting show. And then we talked about Freightonomics earlier and what they talked about on Wednesday. Wednesday as well with Sonar, filmed and broadcast at 4 p.m. You can catch all of these on Freightcast or anywhere where you can download video media. YouTube, Vimeo.
Or you could go to tv.freightwaves.com and sign up today. Do it right now. Just as soon as we're done talking, go to tv.freightwaves.com, sign up. You'll see them all.
You will see it all.
The whole archive, everything in there.
You will see it all. And Tuesday, Put That Coffee Down 2, we have some posts out on LinkedIn. We're giving away a Put That Coffee Down hat. All you have to do is post something on LinkedIn or Twitter and tag Dooner or myself, preferably both of us, and we'll put you in the raffle. It's a great hat. It looks like the Baltimore Orioles back in the day, but instead of the Oriole, we have the Put the Coffee Down logo. So go out on LinkedIn, Twitter, social media, and find those and post those out, and we'll put you in for that.
Yeah.
But that wraps it up for this edition of the Midday Market Update.
Amen.
Peace and love.
Peace and love, everyone.